So, you guys like jokes?
I like jokes.
Okay, cool. Well, I got a joke I'm about to drop on you. So a thief is so
Good.
bad.
It took everything everything inside of me not to click on that link you said do not click
I
on.
know. Don't click on the dad jokes link. A thief broke into my house last night looking for money.
Oh yeah?
So I
Sounds
got
terrible.
up to join him.
What?
That's a classic
Wow.
that's a classic dad joke.
Yeah, that's a classic dad joke. So it just sort of reflects everything about dads inside riding trainers, just a bunch of cheap dads cobbling together systems. Like this is not your, Peloton photo op when you look at the photos of where these guys are getting it on with their trainers every morning.
Getting it on with their trainers every morning.
Yeah,
Yep.
I get it on my train every morning.
Yep, that's great. All right. Welcome everybody to the Never Going Pro podcast featuring dads inside riding trainers, featuring GC coaching. It's a podcast about riding bikes and parenthood and trying really, really hard at both. I'm your host, Ken the Badger Nowell, and with me is Shane Gaffney, owner of GC Coaching, and also
Yep.
Chris Gorney, fellow Dirt teammate and our marketing consultant. So let's just take a few minutes to catch up with everybody, see how everyone's week going. So, guys, how is everyone?
Everyone's good here, man.
Kids good?
Chris is a sick one at home.
Yeah, my daughter is a champ until things don't go her way. And then it's like two Legos that don't connect the right way is the world ending. So no, she's got a fever. She's fine. She just I think she's smart and realizes that when she's sick, she just gets to eat all the cheese crackers and blueberries she wants.
Oh boy, yeah.
So that's she's not dumb, but no, she's fine. It's when a sick kid at home is often worse on the parent who is watching said sick kid than it is for the kid. But
I tell you, I never minded it too much when I would call in sick, and my daughter, she was just the most cuddly thing all day. We just cuddle up on the couch all day and watch silly shows and maybe the occasional mountain bike video. So anyway, how old are your kids? How old are your kids, guys? I'm sure our audience would like to know.
Oh, that's great. Go ahead, Shane.
I have a almost 3-year-old named Finn. He'll be 3 in September, and I have a 5-month-old. Well, I'll show you. Almost 5-month-old named Grace.
Oh, that's so great. I actually didn't know. I thought your kids were older.
Yeah, 5 months old already. I remember when you were going on paternity leave for a little bit.
Yeah, that was back in February, so it was a while ago.
Ken, you were there at the birth, right? You caught the child?
I wasn't so lucky. I was down here in North Carolina, so I missed the whole event. How about you, Chris? How old are your kids?
I have kid. I have a nearly 2-month old, way off. A terrible father. A nearly 2-year-old little girl named Charlotte.
Awesome.
And we call her Charlie.
Okay.
And we live on Charlotte Street, which was an accident, but is now everyone's like the joke they tell us, like as if they're the first people to say it. So that's like our thing now. It's like, oh, Charlotte on Charlotte Street. And we're like, yeah, thanks. That's like dad joke number 11484118910 now, but whatever.
Yeah, well, I've got a little girl. She's almost 6 years old, so we kept her for an additional year in like a 5's preschool class. So she'll be starting kindergarten here soon. Got a birthday in 2 weeks, and yeah, just living the dream, man.
Hey, can we briefly? I know this is a podcast about dads, parents, moms, which we're all equipped to talk about, of course, and featuring when we'll have moms on here soon, and training. But can we talk about the Tour de France?
We can talk about the Tour
minutes?
de France for a few minutes, and assuming everyone's seen today's stage, congratulations to Caleb Ewan, his first time in the Tour, I believe. Yeah.
Huge. Inches.
Yeah.
Inches.
I need to make a confession. I haven't watched 1 second of the Tour this year.
Well, that's because you don't know anything about cycling.
Not too much.
So
I mean, that's actually a good question. Is Shane, are you a big cycling fan, or is just this just work to you these days?
I'm a huge cycling fan, and yeah, it's just work between GC coaching, ZWIFT, and then obviously two very young kids. I just don't have a lot of free time on my hands to watch the tour. So I'm hoping to catch up on it this weekend if I can. I use the
Well,
NBC Sports Gold app, and it's really nice because they have a lot of nice recaps of episodes.
Well, it's not actually nice. It just here's the thing. Here's my opinion on that, which everyone needs to know. It's not that it's good. It's that this year it sucks slightly less than it has for previous years. And so it's the app. I mean, I don't know. I mean, NBC's got to have money, right? Like they just need to hire one good app developer who's hopefully not listening right now. Like it's just, anyway. I mean, every time I put it on, my sole goal is to not have the stage ruined.
And, you know, it was the first year that they came out with that app. I actually sent a message to NBC. It was the year where I was like, yeah, you know, as soon as like most of us can't watch this until we get off of work if you're in the United States. And, you know, I jumped on and saw that like on the front page or on the home page, Wiggins had won the time trial with Froome in a close second, and they were 1 and 2. And I was like, thanks, you know,
like, thanks,
good job.
Thanks, guys. Well, hey, full confession. I have watched nearly every minute of the tour so far. And I realize how boring that is. But what I do is I put it on in the background while I'm working, and I just listen for the words attack or crash. And then I go back over to it and back it up 15 seconds. And it is an amazingly soothing way to watch the tour.
It is a good way to watch the tour. And I did that in years past, but, you know, being the cheap dad that I am, obviously you've heard my sense of humor. I am now I use a different app called Reddit, where I go on the Peloton community, our Peloton, and just watch the highlights every day about an hour after the stage ends. And that's it.
That's probably a much better use of your time.
I actually get stuff done in July now.
We actually, when we got married, we didn't have a TV for a bunch of years because we decided we just wanted to give that a shot. And then my wife got tired of me like being sad every July. So one July, I got like a surprise gift, and we have a TV solely so that I could watch the Tour de France. Which just shows you how awesome my wife is and how unhealthy I am. Cool. Well, it's a good tour. It is like a changing of the guard. Like you're seeing some older guys, seemingly, you know, final performances maybe, and then some new guys. A lot of cyclocross guys that are just monsters.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that. But, you know, I think the really exciting thing for me is just to see how exciting cross-country racing has gotten. Watching the Les Gets France race last week in Andorra, I guess 1 or 2 weeks before that. And this woman, Kate Courtney, if you're not familiar, is just probably the most dominant American cyclist right now. And maybe one of the most dominant cyclists in the world right now.
For sure.
Yep. She is amazing. She came out of the NICA system, which is basically a high school mountain bike league. And it's just, you know, proliferating throughout the entire United States. It's National Interscholastic Cycling Association. So if you are looking to get involved, I've been coaching as a NICA coach for a local high school for the last season. It was a very rewarding experience, and I just love it.
Oh, that's why you're always posting stuff with high school students going mountain biking. Makes a lot more sense now.
Yes.
I just thought maybe you didn't have anybody else to ride with.
Yeah, I don't just show up at the high school and, you know,
that's better.
You guys want to go ride bikes? You know, it's a volunteer position, but I love it. I pay to do it. It's awesome.
I'm sure they would let you pay.
Oh, they do. Well, cool. So last week we talked about a couple of topics. I can't remember the exact questions, or let me say 2 weeks ago. But the focus question for this week is, when your training schedule gets derailed by work or family commitments, what is the best way to get back on track? And so I know that Shayne has done quite a bit of research on this, and he's about to drop the knowledge on us. So Shayne, we're going to turn it over to the brains of the outfit. Hear what you got to say.
All right.
We have research. You did research and have citations. Is that right?
Yes.
I do. Yep, I do. Yeah, I try to make sure I can back up what I can hopefully say. So
that's one of us should.
When I read that question, I thought of kind of two forks. I guess one fork. One prong of the fork is to talk about detraining, and the other prong of the fork is to talk about how to get yourself back on track again.
Could we call that detraining and retraining?
You could, yeah, detraining, retraining.
Or is that just stupid?
No, not at all. I would say that's retraining, or getting back into shape again, or however you want to say it.
I like the alliteration.
So detraining is essentially you're just losing your aerobic, anaerobic, sprint, endurance, strength. Basically, all the things you're trying to build up with training, you're slowly and steadily losing that. So long story short is as you detrain, you lose your high-end performance first, and you lose your strength and your endurance typically last. So that's why you may have noticed if you do a ZWIFT race after a long time off, you get completely smoked off the gate, but you can go out and ride for a couple hours without too much of an issue.
Okay, so just to clarify, when you say your high-end performance, like are we talking our 1 or 3 second sprint wattage here or something a little longer?
It's a good question.
I would say something a little longer. So I would say somewhere between like the 30-second to 5-minute range.
Okay.
Because you actually maintain your your strength and your sprint fairly well, which the short sprints, like 5 to 10 seconds. But once you start to extend that out into kind of the VO2 max range, that's when you really start to see the differences between the detraining.
So how would I know I have entered, because I'm always thinking like, every man, like terms and things like that. Like, how would I know if I have entered a VO2 max effort when I'm out on the bike? So I even know if I have it or don't have it.
So typically VO2 max is something you can sustain for 5 to 8 minutes. And by the time you get to that 5 to 8 minutes, you are completely just smoked. So you just literally can't turn the pedals any further.
What if that's every day I get on my bike and
That's good.
Is there a problem? Am I doing something wrong?
I don't think so, no. Yeah, good. So typically you can establish what your VO2 max is in a lab doing a RIP test, or you can also use things like WKO software. The models think your VO2 max is. Now, what your VO2 max is, that power, you can sustain that for, like I said, 5 to 8 minutes, typically, depending on your level of training. With the more trained you are, you can sustain it for longer. And then vice versa, the less trained you are, sustain it for less. So the big changes is in the VO2 max. So VO2 max changes happen because you have decreased blood volume, which is essentially your blood plasma, your red blood cells. So you lose your ability to carry oxygen throughout your body. You also lose your lung strength, and your heart can actually shrink in size too, which means the muscles don't pump as efficiently. And you also lose your fat utilization during your training, and you become more reliant on carbohydrate, which is, kind of a big issue because you have a very finite supply of carbohydrate on board, and you have a practically limitless supply of fat on board. So we train to become, it's a kind of a buzzword, become fat adapted. So we train to ideally increase the amount of fat we use in the substrate, and then we ideally try to reduce the amount of carbohydrate we use just to maintain it for longer.
Okay, so I want you to create me like a training plan.
Okay,
good. You just earned another client.
And last piece
Hired.
with that is you also become less insulin sensitive, which means you lose the ability for your muscles to uptake glucose in your bloodstream. It's kind of like a double-edged sword where you burn more carbohydrate for every pedal stroke, but you also are able to absorb less carbohydrate that you're intaking.
Wait, say that again?
So you become more reliant on carbohydrate, and then you also reduce your insulin sensitivity, which means that your muscles' ability to uptake glucose into them decreases.
So it's really a twofold thing. So like you can't get the glucose, which is carbohydrate, into your cells.
Right.
But you also, your body is now requiring that you burn more carbohydrate to fuel your efforts. So like now it's like, oh no, man, your body is basically saying, I'm going to burn through these carbohydrates super fast, and there's nothing stored in the tank to keep me going. Okay, got it.
You got it.
So donuts is the answer.
Donuts is great. Yeah, as long as your stomach can tolerate them when you're going full gas, for sure.
So, man, it's interesting. As I've gotten older, like my ability to go out and just eat like crap food is for sure gone down as it does.
Yeah.
But I think because I've both been training on a bike, but also including so many cafe stops with pastries over the years, that I've like also been training my body to be able to continue to eat tons of trashy pastries. So I might not be able to go eat fast food anymore, but I can still hammer a ton of donuts without getting a stomach ache. And I think it's because of cycling.
Sure.
Which is an amazing joy in my life.
Yeah, that's good.
Sure.
So I guess, Shayne, what are your thoughts on fueling a ride with stuff like donuts? Is the fat content too high in them to be really ideal?
Yeah, the fat content will be too high, and it'll be more or less.
Don't ruin this for me.
Hey, you're
Shayne.
adapted. This doesn't apply to you.
How heavy the food is, the more heavy, the more rich, the more dense the food is, the harder it's going to be for you to digest it. So that's why things like, easily absorbed foods like gels or shot blocks, things like that have become popular. And also just eating, bananas, kind of a more easy to digest foods are popular too. But I think a donut is fine, or a pastry is fine, or whatever, if you're at a rest stop, because, if it's something that you'll enjoy to eat and it's something that's going to be absorbed relatively quickly because it's pretty high in sugar, then I don't see any problem with it, But for a race, probably not good.
Well, plus cafe stops. I know it's not, riding indoors on trainers
For sure.
like we do. But cafe stop, I think, is a crucial part of outdoor cycling. And I think everyone's got their mileage. Ken, do you have a mileage minimum you have to ride before you allow yourself to have a cafe stop?
Man, no, not really. Usually my bike rides, being a dad with a tight schedule, I rarely get the luxury of doing the cafe stop. I usually have just enough time to. And for me, it's not road riding anymore. And I can tell you a little anecdote about why here in a minute. But I throw my bike in the back of the truck and go to the trail, and I ride for as long as I can, and then drive back. And fortunately, I'm close to having some really close single track trails to my house. I'm mainly just a mountain biker or riding on ZWIFT, and I can ride my bike straight to the trailhead from here. But yeah, one morning about it was 2000, almost 2 years ago. I was out mountain biking, had just hit a whole bunch of PRs and was segment seeking for Strava, and got some top 10s, and just cruising back through town in a bike lane, and somebody pulled out in front of me and sent me over their hood. And, ever since that day, I just have not had the desire to go out on the road. And I've only been on the road maybe a half a dozen or 10 times since then, and that was 2 years ago.
I can't blame you there for doing that at all for that one. That's scary.
Those are scary. Mm-hmm. Those are scary things, man.
And this is not to, for anybody, I'm not trying to use scare tactics. That's just my reality and my risk assessment. And I haven't missed it. I mean, once I got onto ZWIFT, it was so engaging the way Dad's Inside Riding Trainers, or DIRT, had set it up with the voice chat, and we started creating our own races, and it's just such a rich community that it's very engaging. And then I get my outdoor fix by going out on my mountain bike when I can.
What a funny add to the Discord target group, the target audience. They started this thing and they've got it all built around video game chats, and all of a sudden thousands and thousands of strangely and awkwardly fit middle-aged people all of a sudden get on Discord to talk about cycling at 5 a.m. It's just I'm sure they're just sitting around their office going, okay, I don't know what this is about.
Yeah, this is money. Sure, fantastic. Who are these guys? Yeah.
Seriously, they're our next sponsor.
That would be great. So Shayne, I was looking under your notes, and there's some really shocking things that I saw what you mentioned, you typically see a fitness decrease 2 to 3 times as fast as it is regained in sedentary people.
Sedentary people.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about that versus somebody who, like you mentioned, Miguel
Yeah,
Indurain,
Indurain, Big Mig.
later in the article, and so explain like the difference between your couch potato that's just been riding for the summertime and is gone back to the couch versus Miguel Indurain.
Sure. Yeah. So I wanted to kind of take two different athlete types because Zwift is very encompassing, and hopefully the podcast listeners are too, where some athletes are going to be very highly trained and some athletes are going to be, more of a summer fair weather type riders. So the big thing with detraining is the more fitness you have, the less the detraining is going to affect you and the slower the decreases are going to be. So this one study I found published by Nolan, he took a group of sedentary individuals and he had them do a 13-week training routine. And then he separated it out into two groups. One group didn't do anything for a month, and the other group did a decreased amount of exercise for a month. So both groups lost a considerable amount of fitness because I can't remember exactly, but it was a 60% decrease in training for the group that still trained. But what was shocking was the group that didn't do any training, after just 1 week of doing no exercise, all of their response to training was abolished completely. So it was almost like they had never trained before a day in their life.
Wow, that
Holy
is
cow.
crazy.
Again, remember, we're talking sedentary. So, if you're the kind of rider that rides from June to September and then you put your bike away, you're going to lose all that fitness you've gained in about a week or 2 weeks, believe it or not.
Damn.
That's why it's really key to, which we'll get to later, is to, keep yourself going, ideally all year round, doing something. It doesn't have to be necessarily cycling. It could be cross training, but something that's going to be cardiovascularly demanding for you to do.
So did you say that there was a second group that just trained less, like they lowered their volume down?
They trained 60% less than they did during the 13 weeks. And they also had decrease in, VO2 maxes, things like that. But their diminishes were nowhere near as bad as they were for the group that did 1 week of nothing at all.
Gotcha. So the key is like, just don't go back to the couch completely, like keep doing something.
Exactly. Yeah, especially if you are a sedentary type where you're kind of getting into things because, by the time you get to the 13th, 14th week, you'll have some decent fitness built up, but the fitness is going to be very fleeting where you only have about a week before you lose it all if you don't do anything at all.
So essentially, if you're someone who's relatively fit and staying active in some way, then you'll maintain a decent base is really the kind of terminology we could maybe use.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. The more fit you are, and more importantly, the longer you've been fit, the better it's going to be for your longevity in terms of fitness, where you'll lose fitness a lot slower than the average person that is more sedentary, more, sitting for work, things like that.
I tried to pull up some of the graphs you sent us while you were talking, and then I quickly gave up because I know absolutely what none of this means. And so we could give it to, I feel like we could do a podcast on you describing how to read these graphs, but no one would listen to that.
Yeah. And I kind of don't want it to be like that either. I want to give the information in a digestible and understandable format. I don't want to get into, physiology, biology, all that stuff, because that's kind of boring.
Would you say that your description of this study would be like a simple carbohydrate that you could digest easily for quick absorption? Not a donut.
Not a donut, yeah, perhaps. But like I said too, if you like donuts and live life, man, enjoy it.
Okay, I should be clear. I'm using donuts as like a colloquial shorthand for pretty much all pastries, but that's a different podcast.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us what happened. Tell us the story about Miguel Indurain. We're dying to know.
So the other side of this coin is a elite athlete, and Miguel Indurain is obviously a freak of his time. So just to give you some,
and he is, for our audience, he won the Tour de France 5 times.
Right.
He's one of 3 people that have ever done that.
Mm-hmm. It's like 90 or 91 to 95 or something like that.
Right.
So I'm going to give you numbers from testing he did in 1996, and then I'll compare that to testing he did with this test, which was, I should know that number, what year that was done. It was 14 years after his retirement, so he's 46. So let me pause here just so I can get what that year was.
Hey, I also want to just share this with you. Because I wanted to pull it up and look at photos.
2012.
He and I have the same birthday.
Oh, you do?
Miguel Indurain and I have the same birthday, which was
man,
yesterday.
That's awesome.
There you
Put
go.
that on the fun facts for the podcast.
Let me start that over again. All right. So on the other side of that coin, you have professional athletes. And I found a very interesting study of Miguel Indurain, which was produced by Mujica. I don't know how you say his last name. Sorry if I'm butchering that. But he compared his testing from 1996 to a testing he did 14 years after his retirement in 2012. So just to give you an idea of the differences. So his VO2 max in 1996 was 80, which is, off the scale freakish. His FTP, or which this scientist measured it for the onset of blood lactate, which is about 4 millimoles, was a 505 watts, which put his watt per kilo.
So that'd be 20 minutes. 20 minutes of that.
Not necessarily. So we'll get into that later, but FTP isn't necessarily 95% of a 20-minute power, but we can go into that later.
Sure.
So 505 was his FTP. That put his watt per kilo at 6.23. And like we talked before, the carbohydrate to fat reliant. So his FTP as a percentage of his max aerobic power was 88% in 96, which means he can work 88% up to threshold by burning primarily fat, which is huge.
Wow.
So he can work up to very high zone 3 tempo zone, almost into low threshold with burning primarily carbohydrate, with burning primarily fat carbohydrate. And then his last minute for his ramp tests was 572 watts. So you can tell, just an absolute freak athlete.
That is a freak, man.
The testing basically said that he did, he still rode during the 14 years between the tests and the current test, but it was obviously nowhere near what it was before. So the tests he did in 2012, his VO2 max went from 80 to a 57, but 57 is still superior for his age. His FTP went from a 505 to 360. And his watt per kilo went from 6.2 to 3.9. So even with relatively low training, being detrained, he's still a very solid B, if not A, racer.
Right. So that would still put him at, you said that was at 92 kilos, which I believe is about 205 pounds. Like, he's not a little dude.
No, he was 81 kilos during his test in 96. So he's about 11 pounds. 11 kilos heavier.
So really, and part of that was with him, eating some more cheesecake and drinking a little bit more wine between those two times. And
then the big thing I said was the carbohydrate. So his FTP as a percentage of his max aerobic power went from 88 to 80% FTP. So now you're talking 80% FTP. That's when the transition between fat and carbohydrate starts. So he's burning he's burning primarily fat at 8% less than he was in 96. So just less, quote, fat adapted. But the point being, he didn't do jack nothing. Well, I can't say he did jack nothing, but he did a way less training for over 14 years. And he's still a solid B plus A minus racer relative to a sedentary individual who does 3 months of training and they take 1 week off and they lose everything that they've gained.
Right. And he was probably training 20, 25 hours a week, for decades.
At least. Yeah. If not more. Yeah.
He could still dig and find a gear and just hammer
for sure. Yeah. His last minute of the ramp test was still 450 watts. So it was 572 in 96. It was still 450 in 2012.
couple weeks ago, I was on a group ride, and there are these two older guys whose names I won't share, but they, I don't know, they're probably both 60 plus, but both of them were Olympic medalists in different cycling events from years gone by. And holy crap. Like, it's exactly what you're talking about. These guys were just leading the train, and they were just still, I mean, they were working hard, but like, you could, even if you didn't know, I mean, if you'd have just joined the group and you didn't know that these guys were Olympians, you'd be asking, like, who the heck are these guys? They were just a different level.
Yep, absolutely.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Well, so Shayne, let me ask you this. So like, I'm somewhere in the middle between Al Bundy and Miguel Indurain.
Just like everybody else.
and I, right, exactly. And so, and I'm detrained. So let's say, I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, I got the flu, and then I got like a sinus infection, and then I had a reaction to penicillin. It took me out for like a month. What does getting back on track for our typical listener look like?
So before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the differences in like 0 to 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 9 weeks, and 12 weeks. So for a trained athlete, the first 2 weeks, you really won't lose much of anything. And if anything, you'll actually probably absorb and adapt to the training you've done before.
Okay.
As long as you were coming into that illness or that time off or whatever, pretty fatigued. So you're almost using that.
Almost like a
exactly,
taper.
almost like a taper. Yep. So the biggest changes I see with the research is 2 to 4 weeks, where VO2 max can decrease anywhere from 6 to 20% in 2 to 4 weeks, which is crazy. So that's where like you lose all the blood values. You start to lose your ability to carry oxygen. Your stroke rate decreases. All those kind of really unfortunate bad things change. So 0 to 2 weeks, you're kind of in the clear. 2 to 4 weeks is like where everything really starts to cap and kind of go downhill. And then 9+ weeks, that's when you're talking a 20 to 25% loss in VO2 max.
Wow.
So it's almost like if you can salvage it within 2 weeks, you're pretty good. And you definitely want to try to salvage it in 4 weeks, because after 4 weeks, you're kind of going back. You're not going back to ground zero like the sedentary group would, but you're losing about 25% of your aerobic capability at that point. And it's going to take about 2 to 3 times the time you were off to rebuild what you lost. So
wow. So that's depressing. There you have it, everybody. Don't take a 4-week break.
Right. Well, yeah. Don't take a 4-week break by choice. Obviously, things happen. But,
right. Sure.
Yeah, don't take it by choice if you can predict it. As far as like getting back on track, yeah, I like to first kind of take a step back and just reevaluate how long have you been, off for? What were you off for? Because if I had an athlete this year who got the flu in February, and he literally wasn't able to breathe deeply till about May. So even though he could train, he couldn't really dig because the flu, attacks your lungs. So he couldn't breathe deeply because he just had scar tissue in his lungs from the flu. So, it kind of depends what you had going on, why you took that much time off. And then once you do that, then come up with a plan to rebuild the fitness that you lost. And again, the plan depends upon how long the break was. The biggest issue I see is people try to jump right back into where they were before their time off. And that typically can lead to injury or, just really burnout, because if you can't hit the same numbers you were hitting 6 weeks ago, and you come back and try to do a workout you could do 6 weeks ago and you fail it over and over and over again, that's not going to really be great for the psyche and the overall motivation. So,
as I say, I've heard it said many times, like, if you're, and Ken, you and I were texting about this yesterday or the day before. If you're trying to ramp back into a training plan, maybe you've been at rest or whatever, and you start finding that you're failing workouts, like, isn't the smart thing to do to kind of decrease your percentage and like finish well, rather than just like redline it and fail every time? Like, is that kind of what you're saying? Like, if you're entering back into it, maybe you need to say, like, take a long-term perspective and say, my goal is fitness, not just some sort of I don't know, idle inside my own heart about feeling a certain way, or I'm the hard cyclist, but saying, actually, I want to get stronger the right way, smart.
Right.
And maybe that means riding less hard for a while.
Yeah, I would agree. Because you want to rebuild, ideally, you want to rebuild volume first and then intensity second. But if you're time crunched, then you kind of have to do what you have to do. But typically, I like to rebuild volume first if I can with my athletes. And, depending how much time they have available to train, it may be zone 2, 3 for the first couple of weeks to a month, and then maybe throwing in some sweet spot, and then maybe going up into more of a VO2 max type efforts after that. But typically, you want to, I like to play with the training load based off training stress score, or TSS, which we talked about last week. Typically, you want a TSS decreased, by about 50% of what you could tolerate before. So if you were tolerating, say, 800 TSS per week, and then you took a month off, I would probably come back at around 400 to 500 TSS the first week you come back. And I actually did this with Eric Shayne, who's another Dirt member, and I'll link this in the show notes too, as long with the articles. But he went on a 2-week holiday, and his CTL, which is his fitness, was an 83. And he came back the week of, so he left the week of March 18th. He came back the week of 4/8, and his CTL dropped by 20 points. And he was tolerating 700-ish, 750 TSS per week in March. And I started him off at a 530 the first week he came back. And then you want to slowly rebuild the CTL that you lost.
Let's just give a quick shout out to Eric. He is the founder and I guess editor-in-chief of ZWIFT Insider.
That's right.
It's an awesome ZWIFT blog, probably the most popular one. So that's our guy.
Who's going to write all kinds of great articles about this podcast.
Yeah, let's hope. He did. He actually posted an article about our first one.
It was a good article. So, you're talking about TSS score, and these guys, they talk all the time about peaking and being in good form, and why some guys, they're saying, well, if they're going to ride the Giro, they're not going to ride the Tour, and all these things like this, and why the Dauphiné is so important. Like, is that kind of a metric of them doing like a ramp up, and they probably have this all graphed out and mapped out of them trying to like peak and then not lose, because you kind of said that 2-week window. So like that just starts to kind of overlay like a kind of a beautiful complexity to these training plans. It's like, wait, even me as a normal guy, I can apply some of that to my life too. Because it's you're kind of demystifying it a little bit, which I appreciate.
Absolutely. Yeah. So typically an athlete will have 1 or 2 A races that they'll want to be, in quote, peak form for. Typically it'll be 1 in the early season, 1 late season, just so you have some time to do a little bit of rebuilds and a transition in between events. And some athletes just have 1 event per season that they want to peak for. So like we said last time, when you're on form, you have high fitness and low fatigue. So you want to be progressively overloading the body during the base and build phases to ramp up that CTL, or that chronic training load, which is your fitness based on training peaks. You want to slowly ramp that up over the course of months. And then the last week or 2 weeks, that's your taper phase, where you want to try to maintain the CTL as best you can, but let the fatigue drop off to let your form rise. So high form is, again, low fatigue and high fitness. So you can do that by planning out a ATP, or an annual training plan. You can do it by year, you can do it by event, whatever you want to do. But it'll kind of give you a little bit of a roadmap on, how much TSS you want to hit per week, and then when your taper will be, when your transition will be. So kind of like we talked last week about planning your yearly versus a weekly. It's always, I think, better to plan yearly, because you kind of get a better idea where the hard weeks will be, where the easy weeks will be, and just get a better idea of where you'll be for your event that day.
I could see that being beneficial, especially with some of what I've been tackling with structured training programs this year. And some of my goals. So I went on vacation just for a week and just ate terribly, put on like 6 pounds, and had a race. I got back on Friday and had a race on Saturday, and or maybe on Sunday, but I just felt terrible. I mean, I didn't get any. I had failed a couple of workouts. I had decided to take my old wheel-on trainer to the beach with me and do workouts with a power meter instead of erg mode. And I lost my confidence from failing all those workouts. And then coming into that race, I just wasn't in a good headspace and just got shellacked. But what I'm hearing is I probably in real life hadn't lost any fitness. It was just a variety of other factors, maybe bad sleep, bad eating, and, getting in my head with losing a few or failing a few workouts. And that was a big factor.
Yeah. I think confidence is definitely an under talked about thing in endurance sport, which we can talk about another podcast too. But having confidence and having kind of motivation and drive is, I think, as important as having good fitness is.
Well, they say that bonking is as much between the ears as it is in your legs. So they say, whoever they are.
I can definitely believe that. A friend of ours did a 100-miler. Jason Mutchler, you may have read about him. He's was wounded really badly in action, and his found ZWIFT, and it's been really life changing in a positive way for him. But he had a solo 100-miler, and one of our friends pointed out, like, your head's going to give up before your legs do. He suffered it out, and he's one of your clients, Shayne. So
he is. Yep. Yeah. He did. He averaged 21.2 miles an hour and did it in 4 hours and 45 seconds. So sorry, 4 hours and 45 minutes. Excuse me. So yeah, he crushed it compared to what he was doing last year, which is great. I'm stoked for him.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. So we had, I think that this week what we decided to do is really unpack this question in a lot of detail because it applies to so many of us. Whereas last week we tried to touch on, multiple questions. I think we are starting to run a little bit short on time. I was going to get into some of the dirt origin story, but we can save that for our next episode and have a little fun with telling the story behind that.
And we're going to start doing dad stories too, right?
Yep, we're going to start doing some dad stories, and we're going to pick out one of our members and profile that person, and so we'll really put a human face on what we have going on with dads inside riding trainers.
Can we ask for stories from dads?
For sure.
Are we allowed to do that?
We are allowed to do that.
Great.
As a matter of fact, on the indoorspecialist.com, you can already read quite a few stories about some of the members of our team, just fascinating people from around the world. And they're all just like us, they're all just doing the deal, trying to stay fit and balancing life, parenthood, work.
All the above.
You know how it is. All of the above. Well, guys, it's been an excellent episode. Thank you both for joining in. Shayne, thanks for all the hard work and the research into putting into this, and Chris Gorney again for his marketing efforts and our logos. And we will see you all again in 2 weeks. So everybody ride on and have a good week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.